Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL Show. We are back with another week of kind of chaos and a lot of fun stuff to talk about. As we know, the real debates that should be talked about tonight are the ones that are USL related. Nothing else going on today whatsoever. So I hear.
Yeah, we're going to be a lot less orange looking than anything you're going to be seeing on TV. So,
Hey, apparently there was something with the U.S. men's national team, but that it's not even important because as Nicholas Murray puts into our live chat, which you should check out if you're on podcast players, there's a guy named Nick Marcanic who maybe should get a chance because dude's on fire, and we will talk all about that.
who is that?
Never heard of him. I don't know. Um, Scored more goals than Lionel Messi. You'll never sing that. So John, you were gone. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. As we've got a comment already, I got a big haircut. I hadn't had a haircut in 7 months, so I was
Wow.
overdue. Yeah, but feeling good. Happy to be back on the show.
Lovely. Yeah, well, hey, there's so much to talk about, and I kind of want to just go ahead and get into what was the most exciting thing in the USL, both in terms of what it meant off the field, but also the on the field action. My goodness, Lexington opens up their stadium with the most exciting match to be played in the Super League so far, a 3-2 win for Tampa Bay Sun. Unfortunately, Lexington does not come out on top, but I mean, first off, the stadium is just awesome.
No, and it looks good. I think you can see the highway in the background, which is very much a benefit of like this is accessible, this is closer. They got about 4,000 people there. I saw some comments already about alcohol sales kind of being nice when you're at a professional soccer game. The field looked great, like all of the field itself and the stadium, the seats, it looked like a very professional atmosphere, a level above some of the more modular setups that you often see. Like you can tell Lexington has put a lot of effort into personalizing this and making this feel like Lexington with the color scheme, with all of the add-ins that you want to see. On the field, game-wise, we'll get into it a little bit. I thought this was definitely a game where Tampa Bay, a team we really considered to be a favorite coming into the preseason because of the talent they've got, they lived up to that. Like they finally came together. They gelled tactically. I know you gave a very good video about the DC Power game. Like they feel like they had some correctable things and are starting to work towards that end. And Lexington was strong as well. I thought the tweaks they made before halftime, like making a tactical substitution around the 40th minute, was quite bold to see. So lots to like on that front as well for a Lexington team that looks good. But yeah, just a great occasion for the city of Lexington.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the off the pitch, I mean, the stadium looks awesome. Just outright. I mean, the stadium looks awesome. The hard hats they apparently gave away were actual hard hats that you could wear at a job site, which I think that's kind of cool. When I saw there was
That was
only
great.
500, I was like, how much did the stadium cost that we can't afford little plastic things? Apparently, it's a real deal. But that's really cool. And Lexington has shown that they are willing to do things at the top level. And when we talk about the match itself, I mean, we're seeing, and this is, I think, kind of what we talked about a little bit as these weeks go on, teams get to know each other a little bit better. I mean, I know the score line reflects 3-2 to Tampa Bay Sun, but that also reflects how many game weeks they've had together. I mean, you can really tell that the Sun had another match day under their legs than Lexington. I mean, not to say that Lexington necessarily started slow, but it felt like the Sun started at a different pace than Lexington. And it felt like it just kind of lasted throughout the entire time. The one thing, and you kind of mentioned the video I put out earlier today, of the one thing that the Sun really tried to do against DC was, I mean, it was all the time. We are going to pass it to our left-hand side, to my left center back, over to my left back, and my left back is going to kick it long and try to get something on the overlap. And don't get me wrong, they were really letting Orcus just kind of be kind of quarterback. You have the ball, see what they give you, play what they give you. But it felt like the attack flowed a little bit more than it did against DC when it was just, we're going to pass it, lump it long. And also, just Lexington allowed them to take advantage. Lexington pressed a little bit more than DC did. And these it fell right into DC hands a few weeks ago. Lexington, not as much. They were able to get through those lines by being able to break through just a light press. I don't know. It was impressive to watch from the sun, but I mean, Michael Fuchs does put it in. I mean, deadliest set piece team in the Super League. I mean, the set pieces were nice. They were very good.
What's fun about the set pieces is that they've got Madison Perez taking them most of the time, who's a
Mhm.
central defender. Like that's something you never see really in a lot of, like at the highest levels of the game. It's rare to have a defender be the person to do that. And I mean, she can hit a free kick, she can hit a corner. She's very good. Lexington, for me, the fascinating thing right now is how, I don't want to say jumpy, but they're very quick to change up their approach and swap players around. We saw it in the Ascent game where I think they changed their left back, right back, and one of their center mids around the 25th minute. They made that
Yep.
first half substitution against the Sun. When you're so early into a league where every team is an expansion team, every team is trying to figure it out, I'm kind of here for the experimentation. Like you want to see them trying ideas. There isn't a preset hierarchy of, okay, we know these are going to be our best players. Like if you've got the squad depth and you've got the versatility, go and see what works. And I mean, hey, Lexington came back in that game because of what they changed in the midfield, because of the way they were able to activate Maddie Parsons a lot more in deeper areas, get her moving the ball. And I mean, she's a bulldozer in the midfield, man. She's taken the ball away. She's very progressive as a passer. Looks like somebody who can really make a difference for this side.
Yeah, I mean, you end up getting it. I mean, Lexington goes down 3-1. McGuire gets one in the 83rd. And honestly, after that goal went in, just kind of by the way things were going, I was fully convinced Lexington was going to get the third of their own. It really felt like that match had flipped on its head. And I was very excited to see how this one was going to go. It felt like one of those matches that if it had gone on for 10 more minutes, that both teams would have bagged 1, 2, even 3 more goals. It just felt like there was more in there.
No, it was a great game to watch for sure. Really end to end. Both teams coming out with a lot more flow than they had in previous weeks. So, yeah, promising for both.
Well, let's kind of go ahead and jump into what you kind of wrote with your back four article this week. Sort of. I mean, we've had a little bit of a Super League talk with you as well. But, you kind of talk about the roster freeze. And there's a couple things that the roster freeze is, and there's a couple things that the roster freeze is. And I read it, and it still confuses me. So someone correct me if I'm wrong here. This is not a transfer deadline. Players can still join the team after this date, but they cannot be on the playoff roster, correct?
I am not the person to ask. I know that there's some sort of games minimum. I think that you're on the ball, but like I'm not gonna go out on a limb and say you're correct because I don't know for sure.
That's my understanding, and it's essentially that a player can join, they can play for you, but they cannot play in the playoffs for you. I think a goalkeeper is different though, because
That's where the game minimum is throwing me. Yeah.
I think that the game minimum for goalkeepers, if I read it correctly, is that counts as appearances on the bench for goalkeepers. So we don't get, I mean, do you remember the COVID year or the year after COVID where everybody was an emergency goalkeeper loan?
Yeah, and well, the thing that sticks in my mind is when San Antonio signed that guy and benched Farr last year. And it was the whole kerfuffle because like you're benching Jordan Farr, but then they've got to have the games minimum, and I mean that clearly went well.
The things that notoriously went very well for them. So not to fully spoil your back four article because you should read it. Go subscribe. It's on the Substack. The Substack's free, people. What are we
Free,
doing?
people. Unless you
Yeah.
want to pay me $30, which is an option on Substack, but yeah, free.
Let's talk about some of these players that you've talked about that kind of joined through. I think the biggest one that was a shock to me, that really gave me a real shock to the system, was Ben Bender down to from Charlotte to Tampa Bay, because it feels like Tampa Bay didn't really need anything else. But Ben Bender was a guy who was an actual viable piece for Charlotte and MLS even just a year ago. For him to go down to Tampa Bay, I mean, obviously they don't get a win versus Switchbacks. We'll talk about that later. Man, that one felt like impactful.
Yeah, I mean, Bender was a guy who, as a rookie in MLS, made 28 appearances, had 6 assists, kind of earned his way into being like a real impact player right off the bat as a 22-year-old. Played a little bit less in year 2, and now in year 3, like struggling to get minutes. But the talent is there. This is a guy who can hold down any position in the attacking midfield, got a very good left foot. You can see him in the kind of Josh Perez, Danny Crisostomo role in the higher areas of that Tampa Bay midfield. The question becomes, like, Perez and Crisostomo have both been pretty good in this team. If you can get a Bender, you get a Bender because he's that level of player. But the Rowdies have been really struggling in the defensive half of the field. The back line feels like it needs another piece to add in central defense unless somebody's coming back and getting healthy quickly. I love the move in a vacuum, but if you're going to do one thing as we're approaching the roster freeze, I don't quite know if that was the one for me.
Is there a world where Tampa Bay saw who they would have to play against in the playoffs, a la Charleston and Louisville, and said, we're not going to keep them from scoring 2. We're going to score 3?
I mean, yeah, probably. Like, knowing the fact that you're often using wingbacks in central defense, knowing that you've got Ryan Spalding tearing it up on the left wingback spot, kind of leaning into we're scoring more than you is a viable strategy. So, and I think that Bender especially brings you, like, the way he runs, the way he can fill the channels is a great compliment to the Arteaga Jennings duo. But yeah, like, you see the vision. I just don't know if I was running the Rowdies, if it's what I would have gone for.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of others. Again, I don't want to give away the entire article because read it, people. It's great. It comes to your inbox. It's awesome. There's a couple that really intrigue me, and there's a couple that confuse me. I want to talk about the first one that's on there is Rafael Baca to Oakland. I think a lot of people were shocked by this news. To me, it feels like a good fit. It feels like the right fit, and it shocked me too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. When we were talking to Tommy when we were in Oakland, he was saying, like, if there's an area where we want this team to improve, it's in the central midfield. So the Roots have been aware of the fact that they needed some extra piece to really be a difference maker in that area. And I think Baca is about as good as you could have possibly got in the number 6 spot for that team. He's somebody who kind of flew under the radar in Monterrey just because of the market, because he plays an unsexy position and doesn't kind of do the flashy things. But he's excellent at taking the ball away from opposing carriers, very efficient as a tackler. He's quite good at, like, setting the tempo, passing vertically. He knows when to kind of change momentum, try to beat a man and get through the lines. He's kind of everything that you want out of a number 6. And Oakland really hasn't had that. I'm fascinated to see who they pair with him. Like, the idea of Baca sitting deeper and Camden Riley being free to do whatever he wants to do feels like a no-brainer for them right now. But they've got the depth between Gomez, Matsoso, Donaciano to really mix it up as the game dictates. I think Gavin Litton with that extra leadership, with the surety that Baca gives you, is in a really good position going forward to set up that team.
Well, I was going to ask you about Camden Riley because I think that one thing with Camden is that you're having to talk about team six or setting up a team for success versus individual's best role. Because you say that Camden's a no-brainer to go alongside Baca. I completely agree. But as you mentioned in your Substack article, Camden's kind of needed in the back line. That I don't know if they're going to put them in the middle, even though I think Camden Riley has arguably been their best midfielder at a lot of times this year. Uh, I feel like they might drop him back there to be that kind of ball playing center back and pair somebody else with him as like a 8 or a 9, or sorry, not a 9, but as a 10.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the beauty of having so many talented players now in the mix that you could say, okay, cool, we're going to have Baca be very defensive and put Lindo Mfeka in as the number 10, and we're going to let Riley be in the back line. And they've got depth in central defense as well. Like, Gagi has been amazing. Hackshaw, I think, has been solid, if unspectacular. I like Nialogue more than other people do at certain points. But the fact that Glinton has all these options, right? He can pick and choose. What does he want a back three, or is he using 2 center backs? Where does he want Riley to play at a given time? That's really been Oakland's strength when they've found their wins and risen up the table, is that they've got the versatility. They can play players at different spots in the field and still get a good performance. Baca can kind of be the guy at the center of it all who holds things together and prevents those games like we just saw where they're losing 5-0 to Pittsburgh or to North Carolina. Like, he has that leadership, that ability to kind of slow down a game that Oakland has kind of lacked in the midfield thus far.
I want to kind of combine 2 signings here. And because they're on the I'm confused train. And it's going to be Valesky for Monterey Bay. He's back. And Neville for Sacramento. Where, I mean, Valesky, it feels like, okay, he played really well for Monterey. Let's run it back. But if you look at the way he played in the CPL, the Canadian Premier League, it wasn't good. And it's widely accepted for that to be a step below the championship. I think that if you look at that kind of value of he dropped a level and got worse, why would you bring him back other than Monterey likes to not spend money? And then you have Neville, who goes over to Sacramento, whom he's frankly not good, where it doesn't really make sense to have him in the team.
I think both of these are injury-related moves.
Okay.
So for Monterey, it's Traeger has been a little bit in and out. Whenever they play Las Vegas, I think is when he's expected back. But like, they just kind of needed a warm body who can do number 9 things. And hey, I mean, Valesky, he knows Monterey, even though Jordan Stewart has kind of instilled a different system. Like, he knows the culture. He has those connections with a heck of a lot of guys on that roster. If he's just going to be the backup striker, that's fine. Should Monterey have probably done something bigger than like bring in Christian Valesky again? Yeah, but like, they're not going to spend that money. On the Harvey Neville front, I was totally with you that like, oh, that guy's kind of bad. Like, if you ever look at anything an Inter Miami fan has written, you would think he's the worst player to ever tie up his boots. He's actually had a very successful season in MLS Next Pro with Timbers 2. On the sly, his loan with Loudoun was successful as well. Like, he's almost creating 2 chances a game, very high volume crosser. His job in that Sacramento team is just going to be backup right back. Like, given that Jonathan Ricketts is hurt, they needed one more piece of depth. You saw him sub on late in that game over the weekend against the Battery. Like, that's going to be his job. He'll get 15 to 20 minutes if needed. I think he can give you something in those minutes, but like the expectation again is like warm body.
I mean, you kind of mentioned his, just the high volume crosses, which I really do feel like a lot of times this year or last year with Loudon, whenever things weren't going well, that was just kind of their calling card is just get the ball into the box, which is honestly Sacramento's calling card too. I mean, their entire
Right.
team is death by a billion crosses. There's going to be eventually a header that your center back does not get to and will score. It's just kind of how it works. So I guess if you're looking for a guy to come in late or start in a match that you, I don't want to say you don't care about, but one that you feel like you can win pretty easily, or one that you feel like, our seating in the West doesn't matter too much, you can save Gurr's legs a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, let's say we get to early October, the Republic feel like they're settled in as either number 2 or number 1. Just start Harvey Neville for a game, let Gurr sit. That's why he's being brought in at this point. He's break glass in case of emergency, can do the job at wingback.
I mean, I want to look at the standings, but last time I looked at them, I'm about to sneeze. Goodness gracious. Gosh, oh, that was horrible.
Didn't hear a thing. That was smooth.
Thank you. Is there any chance that Sacramento catches up to New Mexico?
Yeah, because they play them twice.
They still haven't played?
They still haven't played. I'm 99% sure that both of their games are still on the schedule, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Like that.
Oh,
kudos to the schedule makers who couldn't have known. Yeah, but that's going to be amazing.
They play them twice in 3 games. How about that? Well, there goes that, because I understand they have a game in hand, but they're still behind by 10 points. And just the way that New Mexico's played this year, 10 points feels like a lot, but if you have 6 points in front of you and an extra 3 points in hand, I guess you can make that pace up, but that still requires you to go 3-0. Do you think they have that in them?
Yeah, just because like you look at that team, you look at the talent they've assembled. They've almost felt like they're in this lower gear for a lot of 2024, frankly. And now that they're getting their players back and healthy, I just trust this team more than anybody else in the West, I think.
Is it trust them to catch up to New Mexico or trust them to make it to a final? Because those are 2 different things to me.
A little bit of both. Like no team is more playoff proven in the West, certainly. Like that one, you almost feel like even if they're the 2 seed, they're still going to be the favorite when you get to the playoffs.
Sure.
And they've got enough leash with that double against New Mexico that anything is possible. If they win both of them, I think that it's really going to be a confidence boost and a confidence knock for New Mexico in a way that'll probably propel the Republic up to number 1.
Well, before we get over to Lexington, I just want to throw it out there. Legion actually signed a forward, and I'm stunned. I didn't think they would do it.
Yeah, give me some Darwin thoughts right off the bat.
More technical, less clinical, Nico Brett.
Okay, interesting.
He's a smaller forward that you're expecting someone through the middle, probably Tyler Pasher, to play through. And, some tells me that he's going to have to create a little bit to get a shot off, but he feels more like a false 9, number 10, than an out-and-out number 9 that he's been given. But maybe he's grown since going to Croatia. That maybe he's changed a little bit, more physical. But from what I was able to really remember from watching him and then going back and watching the film, just more technical, a little bit less clinical version of Nico.
I'm seeing that he won 10% of his aerial duels when he was last in the championship, which is
he's 5'5". That's not fair.
Yeah. Frankly, when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I remember him being a winger, but which would be very on brand for the Legion, frankly. But yeah,
I don't. Because I went back today and watched some film. I don't think he is. He was kind of. he was kind of sitting behind Traeger and Goodrum at that United team, and he was just kind
Sure.
of
Yes.
he was
Okay.
the one that was kind of in behind them the entire time
Right.
and would make those late runs into the box essentially.
Okay. Yeah. Now that you mention it, I'm remembering it. It's an interesting fit for sure. I think he's a good player, and I'm fascinated to see how they use him there.
Speaking of that United team, this is just really random. I would love to go through the old MLS 2 teams and just see who were on those teams because I mean Caleb Wiley's Chelsea now. Goodrum was on that team. Traeger was on that team. Now you have oh my gosh, I just said his name. Darwin was now on that team, who is still who's now back in the championship. Like that Atlanta United. Oh, and Aiden McFadden is
Yeah. Bryce
still in the,
Washington ended up with North Carolina.
yeah.
Yeah. A Johnny Fortune is killing in MLS.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of players that were on that team that Atlanta United 2 team was horrifically bad. But
So
by
bad.
God, they have given so much talent to this league.
Yeah. No. Real quick, I am going to take advantage of the comment here to talk about Vigo Ortiz because Charleston have poached another extremely exciting Mexican American dual national.
They can't stop.
Cannot stop. I don't know if you like looked this guy up. I mean, he's what, 15 years old?
15 years old,
Mostly
yeah.
plays as a left winger. Incredibly skillful on the ball. Like just, and granted at that age, it is what it is, but he's tearing kids apart, doing everything you want to see in the final third. He won the MVP at some sort of major youth tournament when he was with Austin. So you
Yeah.
love to see the battery taking the gains from Barajas, taking the gains from Nick Markanek eventually, and like circling back, doubling down, making sure that you're filling the pipeline, creating that virtuous cycle. It's spectacular.
I mean, let's talk about Charleston a little bit. We weren't originally planning to, but that seems like a massive oversight. Well, I said we were. We were going to talk about Lexington and NoCo, but let's talk about Charleston, where Markanek ties the record set by Audrey Berry. I kind of put this out on socials. I understand that my feed is essentially taken up by Ben Clemens, and he is all my Twitter feed ever is. But outside of Ben and Charleston and all the Charleston fans that are in my mentions, I feel like Markanek's run has not been as celebrated as Audrey Berry. If weirdly enough, I feel like when Audrey Berry was really just bagging goals, like there was like the USL Twitter was just absolutely on fire. Like this guy is crazy. Sorry, I thought I said tie. Did I say break? That's on me.
No. You omitted Lancaster.
Oh, I always forget about 2018. Apparently,
And also, it all circles back to Lexington.
it all circles back to Lexington. All roads. But I feel like weirdly enough, Mark Hanks is not getting enough love for the season he's had. And we've had nothing but amazing things to say. But if you remember, we almost left him off the midseason All USL team.
Granted, that was the worst possible timing because Charleston
Yeah,
was in the middle
this
of
is
that
true.
scoreless run.
Yeah,
But
it was bad timing.
yeah, I do think that there's something to be said for the way Markinick scores. Like Barry kind of had that penchant for the spectacular. He was getting goals in transition, doing things from range, scoring, like hammering things in from tight angles. There's something about his game that catches the eye to a greater degree. Markinick, like he's so smart with the way he moves in the box. He's converted a handful of penalties, but enough that it probably makes a difference in terms of like you're not going to see as many of the highlights. He's just a player that's a little bit more cerebral. That makes him more effective and makes it so he can fit perfectly in the Ben Pierman system. Like you wouldn't trade that ability for the world. But yeah, no, I think I have sensed a similar thing to what you're saying.
For what Ellen puts, do you think he'll translate at the next level when he's forced onto his right? Honestly, teams have been trying all year to force him onto his right. he finds a way to his left. Like he's intelligent, and he's the one thing about Mark Hennig too that maybe I don't have Audrey Berry's stats in front of me, but my remembering is Mark Hennig also does the assisting thing that, if he's forced onto his right, well, he'll just pass before he is, and he'll open somebody else up. I don't remember Audrey Berry really doing that. I don't really
Barry had
remember
that
him.
he had that phase where he was kind of playing as a midfielder. Like he dropped extremely deep. They were sending Galena and Beckford way far upfield as those runners, and he was blasting switches to them, which it was more like cherry picking assists than the kind of skillful, very like you're beating a defender, you're getting to the end line, you're cutting back on with a right-footed cross. Like you see that from Marcanic in a way that Barry wasn't quite as deft in tight spaces. So I think that Marcanic gives you more in the context of like he will obviously beat a defender. He's so good with the ball at his feet, finding his left foot. And he's got that double threat when he gets into space. He can shoot, he can curl a shot in, but he knows how to like play a pass against his body to serve in an overlapping fullback. He knows how to go a little bit harder and switch the point of attack. He's got a very good read in the final third that makes him so dangerous beyond just the goals.
Can I tell you something before we actually talk about the match itself?
Yeah.
Every time I see him, especially whenever like someone gets a video of him scoring and they do the whole thing, I'm always so shocked at how young he looks.
Yeah.
It always catches me off guard.
He got a little bit of a puppy dog look to him, yeah.
A little bit. Um, in the chat, Aaron Malloy's back, so even more chances for Marcanic now. Weirdly enough, I think Charleston's been better without Malloy, which seems like sacrilegious to say.
Charleston has been involved in a lot of weird games. They feel like they're on the verge of scoring a lot of the time, and it just takes that extra punch. I think weirdly, like the first half against Sacramento was the evidence that they really do need Aaron Malloy. They were really suffering in the face of that press. They lacked the presence in the midfield. Once the Republic started to sit back and they could impose themselves down the middle, the game changed. You're not at that deficit to begin with if you've got Malloy, for my taste.
Do you think that Briggs kind of looks at the way that they played after scoring the goal with regret of not putting more foot on the throat? Because it looked, I don't want to say they look content with the goal because they definitely didn't, but they definitely lost a lot of that intensity after they scored. Do you think he kind of looks back to that with regret, or is it just kind of one of those things of we got beat by a really good team?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question for me of how much is it the coach saying, sit back, defend this lead, and how much of it is just the natural reaction from the players on the pitch who kind of lull themselves into that comfort zone. So he'll want to have certainly said, let's go push on and try to extend this. Like they had the foot on the pedal. They were really pinning Charleston in deep areas. But that's the game of soccer also at a certain point. Like you give up a couple breaks and then everybody decides we're going to sit deeper. We're going to lighten up what we're doing. It's easy to overlook how much of a mental game it is to keep up that level of intensity.
Last question I'm going to have on this because I've kind of thought about it with still thinking about Aaron Malloy coming back.
Yeah.
Do you take Juan Torres off of free kicks? Because man, he's looked fantastic on them.
They kind of split the duties a little bit as the season went on. I think it depends on the situation, but if I, as a fan of entertainment, as somebody who wants to see exciting things, let Torres touch the ball as much as he possibly can, I think would be my answer.
Fair enough. Well, let's go over to Northern Colorado, and we kind of talk about stadiums being built, and I need to find this, where the owner of Northern Colorado came out and basically said, "We're not going anywhere. We're, don't believe everything you read on social media. And this was put out through Walkin 90, which was immediately quote tweeted by an agent that said NoCo hasn't paid their players in months. Which if you haven't checked out Walkin 90, what are you doing? Please do that. They do great work, especially in League One. But all that said, like we talk about the stuff off the pitch with Lexington, NoCo kind of seems to be doing the opposite of that, allegedly. But on the pitch, boy, are they doing the opposite stuff of Lexington, because it is 5-1 to the Hailstorm. And Reddit isn't everything, but there was a post from Reddit. It's like, I can't believe we're letting these guys into the championship thing.
Yeah.
But if you're not versed in League One, or you just look at the League One table, you do not understand that Northern Colorado has an argument to being the best team in League One right now.
One, I love that we both got miffed at the same Reddit post. I think that's very on brand. Two, yeah, like Northern Colorado is a buzzsaw. They've got so many weapons. I think Ethan Horde just won Player of the Month. Like, he's at the striker spot as a rookie, looks like a natural, and he's giving this team, if not Trevor Raymond levels of production, kind of not far off, with what I would argue is probably superior linking play in the process. But Northern Colorado is so much more than just the Bruno Rendon team, or more than the Ethan Horde team. They're very sharp in the build out. I think Jackson Dietrich is one of the most underrated midfielders in the entire league. The guy is so smart about his movement, really steady as a passer. Everything about their system is designed to attack you vertically and quickly, and Lexington wasn't ready for it. On the Lexington side, this broke what was like a 6-game unbeaten streak, if I'm recalling correctly. And it was a run where the defense finally felt like they had figured something out. They were playing this back three with Mendez, Fox, and Corrales. They had that sense of stability. And because they were solid at the back, they could start to build up the patterns up front, right? Like, they were working into Lancaster, working into Cano, those sorts of players, and finding chances. For whatever reason, injury, what have you, they had to drop Christian Liu Young at the right wing back spot. They moved into a back four for this game against the Hailstorm, and they got burned for it. Like, getting away from the system that had finally, after so many months of ups and downs, gotten you back into the playoff mix, and then to get blown out in Northern Colorado really is tough to see.
Couple things here for me. I'm going to plug your Back to Old article. I was glad you included Rendon in your players to make a move. He seems like he's a guy who is going to move abroad, if not just move up and explode. Bruno is just so good. In terms of, it's not everything. Heat maps are not everything, right? Yeah. They tell a lot of the story. If you go to the League One page and you go to this match, there is not a single dot of even faded blue in around the 18-yard box for Lexington. There is a solid 5-yard gap between the next faded blue that Lexington has and everybody else. There was no remnants of an attack, which feels wrong when Cameron Lancaster does score in this game. And you kind of think about, well, what Lancaster was in Louisville, where Lancaster was a hard-working player, not Brian Owenby level of that kind of sitting back level, but Lancaster, he was sitting at the top. He was a striker. He had no presence in this game. He scored the goal, but outside the goal, he had no presence, and it wasn't his fault.
Think about the midfield that they put together. They've got Cano, Cerritos, Diouf, and Lacey. That's 4 strikers, essentially. Like, those are 4 players who have played as a number 9. And that's what you're trying to use as your creative linchpin to build into Lancaster. Like, of course they didn't get into the final third. They didn't have any passers.
I feel like someone who's kind of gotten burned this season by being in this Lexington team them all night, where I feel like not only just fans, but think about the Jamaican national team where he was getting call ups to be a number two or get the occasional spot start. If you're looking at score lines alone, you're thinking this guy's lost it. He still had a pretty good season this year. And man, these score lines just make him look awful.
Yeah, and you hope that whoever's picking the teams is actually watching Lexington play, because he's putting in good performances. It's just the defense cannot find their rhythm.
Which, again, this doesn't need to just become fire him, because I don't want to call anybody to be fired. But when your coach's calling card is defense and you sign like 6 center backs before the season even starts, for you to be thin in the defense and the defense not be good, what are you supposed to do?
It's an interesting conundrum. To circle back to that Reddit thread, there was a comment in there saying like, oh, it's fine, 90% of their players are going to be gone next season when they're in the championship. I don't think that was the goal when Lexington built this roster. Like, I think they were signing Corrales, signing Lancaster, and getting a lot of these guys who were kind of borderline championship players with the full intention of taking them up the league. It's a difficult question now when they've had what is probably going to be deemed as a failure of a 2024 season, to see how that breaks out.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've talked a lot about obviously Lexington here, because I mean, their whole situation is just so fascinating, how they're outspending USL championship clubs and not get the results. And, you look at the names and you're blown away by them. Just to kind of drop back over to NoCo, one of my favorite players in League One is Billy King. I love watching Billy King so much. He just makes me happy. And showed out. He showed out in this game. He was so good.
No, everything about the way Northern Colorado executed was like exactly how Eamon Zayed drew it up. Not only on like the tactical pad, like what he was doing strategy wise, but as a kind of affirmation of this roster build. He's got such an eye for talent from all sorts of places, and it is paying off for Northern Colorado.
And, you had Billy King who, down that left-hand side, he was putting together a lot of passes. He was really just stringing play along. You're going to see, he scores and whatnot. He scores right in front of the net both times. Well, one of them's, outside the box. But, like, he really was putting together passes along that left-hand side and really just kept that attack flowing. And when you have a guy like Billy King on the left-hand side, then you have Rendon over on that right-hand side. And, we talked about Noah Powder being the other side to Rendon in the past. When you have a guy like Billy King, who I say step up, but last year he was a standout as well. And 2 years ago, he was like one of the few bright spots of a NoCo team that was not very good. It just really feels like this team is fully clicking, and they're in the semifinals for the Jägermeister. They are going to be a real threat in the playoffs. If there's any team that I'm afraid of in the playoffs more than anybody, I think it's this Northern Colorado team.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm power ranking teams that look like a title threat right now, got to be the Hailstorm number one. They can beat you in more ways than anybody else in League One, and they feel like they, more so than anybody else, kind of sets the identity of a game and declares what the terms are going to be, dictates their play style against any opponent.
This has been a year of goalkeepers shutting me up because I don't know what I'm talking about. Last year, I was kind of on the anti-Delgado train, which, you hear this about strikers. I thought that Delgado was a pin merchant in the other way, where I didn't think he was very good outside of saving penalties. And this year, he has shut me up. He's been fantastic for them as well.
Yeah, and it's a defense that doesn't give up a lot of chances But whenever they do, Delgado is pretty much stopping them all. Like he is very, very good. And I was higher on him last year than you were, admittedly. But it's really great to see him. I mean, not miss a beat. Like he's improved, if anything, this season.
Which Nicholas Murray does put into the chat that it is going to be semifinals for Jägermeister tomorrow. I'm excited. I am so excited. I'm about to be very sad because there's only 3 more opportunities for me just to throw out the tagline "a shot at glory" without just being weird. If someone at Jägermeister,
you got to make the most of it.
I know, if someone at Jägermeister wants to send me just a shot glass with a shot at glory, please do. I need a shot at glory shot glass. That'd be great.
Jägermeister, just send me a bottle, frankly.
Did I share the story on here on that I got a free bottle of Jaeger because they made a coffee Jägermeister, like a coffee flavored Jaeger, and the bar I was at was basically like, if you take a shot of this and take a picture with this bottle, we'll give you the bottle for free because no one wants it. And I was like, freshly turned 21. I was like, this is the best idea I've ever had. Absolutely.
Yeah, wise. And we've got the recipe for passing out.
My goodness. Is this the new version of a Nicholas bomb, like a Woj bomb, but it's just Nicholas taking Jaeger bombs? Well, let's go ahead and move on down to some predictions, unless I'm forgetting something that we need to talk about. I don't think we are, though. Let's look at these predictions, and there's some interesting stuff. Let's go ahead, start at the very top, one that's happening tomorrow, which is Legion versus Tampa Bay. Legion and Tampa Bay have played 2 close matches, one of them being that Open Cup match where Tampa Bay kind of blows it, and then you have Ardiaga with a bicycle kick and another one to cap it off. And then a couple days later, Legion win 1-0. Legion are looking to do the regular season sweep, but they have not proved to be able to simply score goals against a team that we talked about with Tampa Bay, who is set up to score a lot of goals. How do you think that one's going to go?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a weirdly emotionally charged matchup, given the recent history, given the playoff match. Tampa Bay, I might be out on them until they prove me wrong. They gave up 4 goals against Colorado Springs. They gave up 3 against Detroit. I'm just going to pretend like the Miami game is a thing that didn't happen because that doesn't count for the sample size here. Like Tampa Bay's defense is really struggling at the moment. Can the Legion actually punish that? Remains to be seen because this is a team that's not playing well at all, to the point that, I mean, we've both been seeing the fan base is a little bit riled up in Birmingham right now. I think the Legion come in with possibly Darwin getting some time and just simplify the approach, get back to basics, and they beat Tampa Bay. And like, I think there's got to be some soul searching for the Rowdies if that's the case.
I want to be biased and say, of course, they'll win, but also I'm biased, so I don't feel like they are going to win because I've been hurt. Apparently, Pasture's back. He is going to be back and playing. And then you have Darwin, who's going to be there as well. I feel like Pasture, in general, just changes a lot of things for this team to the point that I think Legion can get a win. I think they have a long time off. They had a long time to sit in what they've done for the last few weeks, that I think they're going to be very fired up for what this match is going to be. I'm going to take Legion purely because Tyler Pasture is going to be playing in the game.
I am curious about Aaron Guillen, who was questionable last weekend, did not end up getting into the starting lineup. If they've got him and Doherty both back healthy, I'm feeling better about Tampa Bay, but I still think Birmingham comes out and wins this one.
Well, let's go ahead and kind of move on from this, where I do have a quick question that, because we aren't going to talk about them, but why do I have slight optimism about Miami right now?
When was the last time you like saw a psychiatrist? I don't know, man. That's a crazy take to have right now.
I mean, listen, I understand hashtag act for the Rondo, but Eric Quill did say earlier that he said that they are a great team for 70 yards, that they are one of the best teams in the league for 70 yards, but unfortunately the field is not 70 yards, which is an insane thing to say. It's hilarious and correct.
It's actually devastatingly accurate. Yeah.
But insane. But I don't know. When I say optimistic, I don't mean like they're going to rattle off a bunch of wins, but also I don't know if they're cross sports connections here. I don't know if they are 2024 Chicago White Sox bad. I feel like they're clawing themselves out of that.
When you've got a sample size of almost 30 games at this point where you're good for at least one galling goalkeeper per game, you consistently cannot keep track of your markers consistently for 90 minutes. Your offensive threat is basically just lump it up to one of your quicker forwards and hope to God that Frank Lopez can do something. They've done very well to kind of bunker in and find what works with their limited talent, but that can only go so far. Like they've maximized a team that isn't set up to succeed. So kudos to Miami for getting to like 3 wins or whatever. But this is not a team that is going to be winning any more games for the rest of the season, frankly.
Fair enough. Let's go ahead and look at New Mexico versus Detroit, where we just talked about New Mexico and their great team for 70 yards. And Detroit is one of those teams that even still, you don't want to face them in the final 30 yards. Like they just look so good defensively. It's been their calling card since they've joined the league. It's still going to be their calling card. Do you think that this New Mexico team can figure it out against Detroit, or do you feel like Detroit is catching New Mexico at the right time?
I think we don't praise New Mexico enough for being a very good attacking side. They're never the team that's going to hang 4 or 5 goals on you, but it's the consistent returns. It's the way they have such attacking variety. I think their midfield, especially, and beyond Marco Micheletto, like if you look at Nanan Husu, if you look at Zico Bailey, these are players who are making an impact in build with the ball at their feet, working into a spade of attacking players who give you a variety of options again. It can be Makwele Akale, who's often played as a number 10 recently and done so quite effectively with that tight control. But it's Jacobo Reyes, it's Daniel Bruce, it's Harry Swartz. Eric Quill can kind of tailor whatever he wants to do given the matchup. That said, in the context of this Detroit game, like we're fresh off a match where Detroit kept a clean sheet against El Paso. They've been in very good defensive form and are kind of back to that classic Detroit level of quality. I think this one's going to be pretty punchy. And also, given that Detroit didn't score against El Paso and looked kind of idealist through that game, I'm thinking this is going to be a 0-0, a 1-1, and I'm going for a draw.
Yeah, honestly, I'm taking New Mexico purely because of what you mentioned, how idealist they have been. I mean, credit for Detroit for trying to make fixes. I mean, they've signed attacking players mid-season trying to fix their goal scoring issues. And this against El Paso was one of the worst as it's been so far. And, hey, El Paso, 2 clean sheets on the bounce. Good for them. Not really a team that you shouldn't be scoring against. Like, if we're being so honest, like, that's a team that you should score against at least once.
And to be fair, like, there was that play where they ruled that the ball had gone over the end line.
Yeah.
And it just hadn't. Like, that should have been a 1-0 Detroit win. But
yeah, that's true.
Still, like if you're not scoring against El Paso and you're getting 0.9 XG, that's bad.
This is one of the worst stats Nicholas Murray's ever put in here. 3 shutouts for El Paso for the first time since 2021. Can someone check on Phil?
Yeah. Phil looked back at the table and decided, "Nah, I'm not doing the pod tonight."
But yeah, I'm taking New Mexico here until Detroit can show me they have offensive answers. I trust their defense a lot. Don't get me wrong, but against a team like New Mexico, they're going to get 1. Oh, 3 in a row, Nicholas Murray says.
Yeah,
I was about to say there's no way they haven't gotten 3 shutouts in a season since 2021.
That would be something.
Goodness. Yeah, I'm going to take Detroit City. The next one up here is going to be our USL Tactics show from last week and a little bit of Pedro fun along the way. Let's go ahead and get into some switchbacks.
Colorado Springs has 11 goals in their last 3 games, and this Saturday's dominant performance against Tampa Bay was another example of how they're able to turn defense into attacking joy. You're going to see an example here where winger Jonas Fjellberg is caught upfield, but left back Matt Real, stepping up and intercepting there, is able to launch his side right back into attack. That's the mean of the switchbacks right now. They're getting very aggressive play from their fullbacks, and that's leading to opportunities upfield for their wingers. You note this play ends with Zach Zandy recovering a ball on the edge of the box and playing his teammates right back in. That's the other plank of what's making this team so good. Here, it's Tyreek McGee making that same sort of recovery, counter-pressing to keep his side in the attacking third and building up to ultimately create a really wonderful chance that Yosuke Hanya heads in at the far post. It's excellent team play, and it's keeping this team in dangerous areas constantly. You see the main hub of activity from Saturday's game. It's in that left side. Now, this wasn't the strongest performance for Tampa Bay, who varied their press, but still, the switchbacks were so able to break down the middle of the pitch. There, it's Justin Dillon, a recently acquired striker, and one who's replaced Ronaldo Damas in the lineup, holding up play, getting McGee on the ball, and leading to another expansive attack. This team knows how to move quickly, whether they're turning you over, whether they're breaking in this manner, right down the middle, leveraging strikerly hold-up play. They move quickly, find opportunities, and consistently break you down. Colorado Springs has really made some moves recently, whether it's dealing Malik Foster or relegating Koa Santos from right back to the bench, but you're seeing the payoff in spades. The extra steal, the extra creativity in the midfield, that extra spark they're getting from wingers like Fjellberg is absolutely definitional to why this team has been so good lately. This team feels like they could really go on to make noise in the West down the stretch.
I mean, Fjellberg is a guy that we've talked about for years now of why didn't, or RGV did start him, but like, why didn't they keep him? Why did Indy 11 do what Indy 11 did, which is not play him when they desperately needed him? And now this year, it really feels like Fjellberg is the guy that we thought he was going to be. And it's always exciting. One thing that you point out here is that counter press, and just the one clip that really sticks out to me, and I can't remember the players off the top of my head now, but was win the ball back on that counter press, go for a pass, the Tampa Bay player clears it away. There's another player just standing there. I mean, it's just constant pressure, even when you do the right thing, which is just get it out of the box. There's just another Colorado Springs player there ready to put in a cross. And it's frustrating to deal with as a player. It's so fun to watch as a neutral.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single team in the league that's more fun to watch than Colorado Springs right now, which is something that you wouldn't have said 2-3 months ago. And we've mentioned it on the show before, but I think that Malik Foster, as much as I rate him as a player and love watching him play, it may have been addition by subtraction. He was a bit too slow on the ball, a bit too indecisive. Certainly someone who's exciting when he's taking you on the dribble, but that can slow down your offense. And frankly, like what they're getting from Justin Dillon at the striker spot ahead of Ronaldo Damas, kind of the same deal. He's better linking play. He's better as a hold-up presence. For my taste, he's a little bit more physical and gives you more effort in the press. It just fits this system of unselfish, counter-pressing, high-intensity soccer. And it's a credit to James Chambers across the board for what this team is doing.
So pair that with Charleston, who we raved about earlier, and how they play and just what they can do to you when you make those mistakes. They have so many people that can punish mistakes. Do you think that Colorado Springs can score enough to really keep the Battery at bay?
I mean, we've seen it with these past couple games where they've got like 11 goals in their last 3, and against teams that like aren't disastrous. It was Tulsa, who was still looking like a good defense at that point. Memphis, who's pretty mercurial, but like that's a top 4 team in the West. There, and Tampa Bay, you say what you will about Minjoma and Bodley at center back. That was kind of a mulligan game for them. But Colorado Springs is converting, and they are getting scoring from all across the board. Like, it's impressive to see what they're doing. I could almost see this game playing out much like the start of the Sacramento Battery game, right? You're coming in with a high-powered a team with a good wing play and a high press, coming in and asking real questions of Charleston, who could look a little shell-shocked going in at elevation in that tough environment. At the same time, I think the Battery kind of learned a lesson from the Sacramento match in terms of what they're doing with the double pivot, trying to win those second balls aggressively, not being afraid of the long ball to just relieve the pressure. I think this game ends in a draw, but I think that's a credit to Colorado Springs at this point, that they're going toe-to-toe with a team like Charleston.
So I decided to look up just the elevation difference between these two teams. Charleston, if I'm looking at this right, it sits at 13 inches above sea level.
Whew.
Going to Colorado Springs, who is 6,035 feet above.
Insane.
So, granted, this says 13.12, so I don't know if that's supposed to be 13.12 inches or 13.12 feet. But, I mean, they're in the low country. Inches makes sense. But I don't know why it's that specific. Anyway, my goodness, like that is going to be a bit of a shell shock in terms of that much of a difference. That's crazy. I find this one really hard because the elevation difference is real. This is a very, very confident Colorado Springs team, and it just feels like they can do everything that would give the Battery fits. But man, I don't think I've picked against the Battery once this year because I just cannot make myself do it. They always seem to find a way, which is why I'm going to take the Battery again. But man, if this turns into one of those 4-4 banger of a matches, it feels so on brand for what these two teams are doing.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's high scoring, and you could really see this turning into a fun one.
Well, we're going to go move on to the Jägermeister matches, but I do have a question for you. Based on what at least I thought Colorado Springs was going to be preseason, which was the worst team in the West, is there a world where Chambers should be Coach of the Year over Quill?
As somebody who picked New Mexico to miss the playoffs, no. Like,
Okay.
I'm just going to own that. But boy, he is climbing up the standings pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm so impressed with what Chambers has done. Let's go over to Jägermeister, where we're going to start off with Madison versus Charlotte. Madison being the home team, and man, Breeze can be an absolute fortress if they really let him be. This one is obviously the semifinals, where Madison keeps doing the dang thing And Charlotte continues to look great, just continues to look great. This one feels like it's going to go to penalties. Do you think someone gets it done in full time?
I've got Charlotte winning this game, I gotta say. It Madison, as good as they can be, as explosive as they can be, there are moments against the best teams in League One, the Omahas, the Charlottes, the Northern Colorados, where they feel like they're overextending offensively. It feels like Galindrez and Cheney and Boyce and Gebhard, that's just a little bit too much tilt towards one side of the field and not enough balance in the middle. And oftentimes against lesser teams, the back three makes up for it. They've got exceptional defenders at the back that can hold them together when it counts. But I think Charlotte is deceptively good at kind of goading you out, forcing you to lose that structure, and then hitting you with Alvarez or Obertan as that player between the lines who can really find the window. So if Charlotte is able to dictate the tempo, keep this game a little bit punchy, I think they can execute and find holes in Madison and go on and get the win.
I'm always scared to say his name because I usually don't listen to the matches with audio on. I do everything audio off, so I don't know how actually. Obregon? Yeah.
I say Obregon, but I
Obregon?
mean, I don't know. Just sound
Sure.
confident and everyone will go with it.
Yeah, that's it. He's special. Like he's legit special. And I think what you're saying about Ford Madsen is right. I have been absolutely fanboy over Ford Madsen. I mean, I'm even wearing kit today. I mean, I love Ford Madsen and what they're doing this year. It feels like they're set up to win the USL League One Cup. But man, I don't think they have it in this Jägermeister. I'm also taking Charlotte. Oh, really? He's
An
not.
important note from Nicholas Murray. Yeah, he just got called up for Honduras, which incredible for him and a deserved reward for the season, but appears to have been released to come back for the match. Great for the Independents.
Wow. And he made his debut for Honduras. I guess he got his debut and they said, go play in the cup. Probably what happened. I mean, he seems like a guy who's going to be a mainstay in that Honduras team for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, if he keeps this form up, definitely.
Yeah, I'm taking Charlotte. I know that Ford Madsen, again, that, I mean, Breeze can be an absolute just fortress for them. It's going to be awesome atmosphere, but I'm going to take Charlotte. On the other side of this, you have Northern Colorado versus Union Omaha, whom Union Omaha gets in on goals scored, which is just another part of the fun of that was the Jägermeister Cup and league play. If everybody was just trying to score as many goals as possible, which was just so much fun. You have a lot of attacking talent on Union Omaha. They're a mainstay for a reason. But I mean, we just gushed over Northern Colorado all day long today. Do you think that Northern Colorado gets it done at home?
I think Northern Colorado has the momentum to go on and do it. And like Omaha, fresh off that 3-1 win against the Triumph, which looks better on paper than it is given Greenville's form, but I digress. Omaha doesn't quite have the toolkit you want to go up against the Hailstorm for my taste. I think that their wingback play can be a little bit suspect in defensive recovery. That's something that someone like a Bruno Rendon is really going to take advantage of. I think given how the Hailstorm are very capable of sitting back into kind of a 4-4-2, a 4-4-1-1, they're not going to fall into the trap when Omaha tries to build down the middle. I suspect we might get Pedro Dolabella as a center mid in this one to just try to anchor play. And I think the Hailstorm are set up to deny the best opportunities that he gets. It just feels like Zayed has this team playing such confident soccer right now. I would feel foolish picking against Northern Colorado, even besides the little matchup things that I like for them.
That's where I feel too. I feel like I can look at all the matchups and my brain tells me that Union Omaha has each matchup, almost every matchup, when you look at pure names on paper. But when you look at form and you just look how they're playing, it's hard not for me just to pick Northern Colorado. They look so good. So I'm also going Northern Colorado, which would set up for both of us, Charlotte versus NoCo, which was that a playoff game last year? Was that the one? Was that the one at? I think it was.
After the bye, I don't remember well enough.
Because NoCo had the one where Rogers scored the Olympico, and then they go on to the next game, and I think that was NoCo versus Charlotte, and Charlotte won in penalties, I think, to go to the finals where they played North Carolina, if I have that playoff bracket correct.
No.
I'm
It
wrong.
was, Charlotte, they beat Greenville, they beat Omaha, they lost at North Carolina.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there goes that. I thought I remembered it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's do our one Super League match this week, and it is the Sun of Tampa Bay, whom, again, we've talked about a good bit, with Brooklyn, who in their first ever match get a result. They go out and they get a result, which great for them. Love that for them. Do you think that Brooklyn can build on some fun early success, or do you think that the Sun can continue their upward momentum?
Yeah, I mean, just focusing on Brooklyn, given that we talked Sun a little bit, I thought it was a very disconnected offensive match for them away at Spokane. Certainly some good ideas and some standout players. Like I thought Samantha Rosette, the team captain at right back, very good passer on either foot, like dictating play from that spot in the half space, and then feeding into Mackenzie George on the right wing, who was taking on anybody who came in her way on the dribble. There wasn't enough presence in the box. They didn't get enough of the cutback options closer to zone 14 down the center of the park. But between kind of the nascent offensive ideas and the quality of their press early in the game, this 4-1-4-1 that was doing really well to limit Spokane, I was bullish on Brooklyn overall. That said, Tampa Bay looked so dangerous against Lexington. I loved what they got out of the Listros Wallet pivot in that game as well. They're not going to give up easy opportunities to Brooklyn. So I'm going Sun here, but I think I'm fascinated to see this as a litmus test for Brooklyn.
I understand that Spokane is a team that does like the whole possession, and like that's something they're very much interested in doing. So, yeah, I said Spokane. So are the Tampa Bay Sun. The Tampa Bay Sun love possession, absolutely love it. And when you watch this match, there were a lot of times where you would see Garciano, who is the forward for Brooklyn, sitting deep and really just kind of being a hold-up play for someone like Mackenzie George or Pluck, the other Mackenzie Pluck, to run on the other side of her. I think and I understand that Tampa Bay shows to be a 4-1-4-1, but they really drop more as a 3-back team most of the time. I think when you're looking at a team that's not creating a ton of pressure against a team that is willing to drop 3 and let everybody else just stack the midfield, it doesn't feel very promising for Brooklyn. So I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Sun. So there's that. Do you have any final USL thoughts?
Well, shout out to Brooklyn because I'll be at the home opener in about 2 weeks. Got a nice little media credential for that one.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take time off of, or take the afternoon off of work to get out to Coney Island on time because that is a trek. But excited.
How long of a train ride is that?
90 minutes.
Oh, not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. That's also, I think it's the night of the Open Cup final.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah.
How about that?
Not that we don't have to discuss it. We don't have a horse in that race, but
No. I no longer want to save the cup. It's irrelevant to me. I guess final USL thought for me. You kind of mentioned the video I put out. We kind of mentioned it earlier. For people, I completely understand if you don't want to watch this, but I'm going to tell you it is 49 minutes of just match analysis of taking both keepers, every touch they take. And the reason I do it that way is because you can tell build-up philosophies and most attacking philosophies from watching both goalkeepers' perspective. You can tell the way they want to build up, and you can tell which way was this team trying to attack the other team. And I find it really fascinating to watch a game from that perspective. And it's 49 minutes long on DC Power versus Tampa Bay Sun, where I end up being absolutely infuriated with the DC Power, and yet it kept working in the second half, which made me even more angry, but it's fine. But it's a long video. It's a different type of video for me, but check it out, I guess.
Yeah, I will return to it. I dipped in for a little bit, and super fun and interesting watch, because I think myself and a lot of people kind of overlook the role of the goalkeeper in a lot of phases of the game. So it's kind of a blind spot for me, which makes it all the more interesting.
Well, how about some other thoughts that you have?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I'm watching anything. I have been binging a lot of Akira Kurosawa movies, the famous 50s, 60s Japanese director, worthy of the reputation of one of the greatest of all time. Like, it just kind of jaw-dropping stuff there. It's like, you've got the social commentaries on post-war Japan. You've got really action-packed samurai films. Super cool to see, and they hold up unbelievably. So nice little fun thing for me recently.
Fun. My wife and I just now got around to watching last year's Great British Baking Show.
I love
We
this.
just finally got around, and I think we're on like week 5, and it's been the funniest season, which, you know, that counts for something. But it does lead me to my hot take, which is the Great British Baking Show really was on a roll, was really at their best when it was just a baking show and not, you know, hey, I need you to create a 7-layer cake. Each layer needs to have 3 fruits and 2 meats in them. Like, it became something really strange. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but it is I don't know. It's taking a weird turn in like the stuff that they have to do. I don't know.
I think there was a certain point after Mary Berry left Mary Berry's off the show, and it's just Paul and other people at this point. But like, after Mary and Mel and Sue left, they kind of started iterating and jumping the shark a little bit. And that's not to say it doesn't rule, because it's just like so
I
quaint
love
and
it.
British. But like,
Yeah.
I think the luster has gone off just a shade.
That's okay, because I still enjoy it. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah.
It's the first episode of the last season, so it's not really a spoiler. Hey, if there are children watching this, earmuffs, earmuffs, earmuffs. But there was a whole segment on Prue asking about this lady's beaver that she had baked, and it's like, can you show me your beaver and stuff like that? And everybody's just like, we can't do this. You can't say that.
That rules.
So, yeah, but that's what we've been doing. But yeah, any final thoughts from you?
All good.
All right. Well, for the first and the final time tonight, how about Alan's voice?
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist Podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.